we're not going to talk about what the last video said the next video was going to be about, because this isn't the next video, even though technically this is the next video. Because there's a different thing I need to talk about before I talk about the topic of the next video, and that's the topic of this video, and it's a prerequisite to the next video. So this is not the next video. This is simply the next video before the next video. Long time ago, I read the Magic the Gathering website daily. This is when I was in college, undergraduate, that long ago. Mark Rosewater is the head of design at Wizards of the Coast for Magic the Gathering. He might have had a promotion since then. And Mark Rosewater is an awesome dude. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, he used to write for the TV show Roseanne, which starred Roseanne Barr. He was one of the writers. And after that, he ended up getting into game design and working at Wizards of the Coast and working for Magic the Gathering. And he basically, everything that you look at in Magic the Gathering now is he's sort of the driving force behind it. Anyway, back in the early 2000s, Mark Rosewater went from being on the design team to becoming the head of the design team. Now, in Magic the Gathering, essentially when they go to make cards, when they're going to put together a new set of cards, there's three basic teams that are involved in that. There's the design team, there's the development team, and there's the creative team. And in a sense, the creative team is kind of part of the design team, kind of, but not really. Anyway, the people who sit around all day and think up new Magic cards as far as the mechanics are design. Mark Rosewater is a designer, and in an article that he had written back in like 2005 about design, he talks about the difference of top-down design versus bottom-up design. And one of the examples he gives is a card that might go into... Well, let's not talk about the top-down versus bottom-up just yet. Let's talk about making a Magic card. So he shows you... Wizards of the Coast has this computer database, and it's called Gatherer. We can access Gatherer to search for Magic cards on their website, but they have a R&D version of Gatherer, and it lets you just type in a Magic card. So he said, okay, well, what if we did one that was 1 colorless mana, red mana, 3 mana casting cost. Instant or sorcery spell does 4 damage to a creature or 2 damage to a player. And that's a card. That's it. That's all it takes. You come up with a mana cost, you come up with a type of card, you come up with some rules text, bam, card designed. The development team is in charge of making sure that those cards are balanced and that the format put together from all of the cards is balanced. And that when you take those cards and shove them into other formats, they're balanced. And so one of their jobs is they play a lot of Magic with cards that don't exist yet. And they make tweaks. They do rules changes to some of those cards. They change the casting costs. They move them from one color to another. They do all kinds of fun stuff with them. And then creative's job is are the people who come in and actually put the flavor on the card. They come up with the name of the card. The designer actually comes up with just a placeholder name. Sometimes those placeholder names are actually used. And a lot of times those placeholder names are just jokes and puns that get thrown out, and a different name is thrown on the card by creative. The flavor text at the bottom of cards is creative. The artwork that goes on the cards is creative. Unless it really matters, like in certain blocks where they're trying to push tribes, if it doesn't matter if a card is an elf or a squirrel, they might change a card from an elf to a squirrel. Although elf is a very dangerous creature type because of its interactions with all the older formats. Anyway, in the article, he talks about top-down versus bottom-up design. So, top-down design is where you have I'm not really going to follow necessarily Magic the Gathering anymore. But top-down design is when you have an experience, you have a vision in mind of what this finished product is supposed to be. You don't know all the details about it, but you've got the overarching, literally top-down view of what it should look like at the end. And then you design things around that. If you've played Magic recently, the Innistrad block was top-down, like as top-down as you can get. Innistrad was a Magic set that was based around kind of like monster movies and horror tropes. Lots of vampires and Frankenstein's monster and all that. And what they did was they would take something like, bam, I want Frankenstein's monster. That is the concept. That is the end goal that I have in mind. I want Frankenstein's monster. So using Magic mechanics and using, basically using Magic mechanics, how can I make something that is Frankenstein's monster, that plays like Frankenstein's monster? And so they made a flip card where you bring the guy into play and then you do something, and I honestly don't remember what it is. And then it flips over and it goes from being a scientist to being a big giant monster. And actually, that's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I'm sorry. I keep saying Frankenstein's monster. I meant Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So it starts off as a dude, and then something happens to, and he transforms into Mr. Hyde and he turns into this big monster. So they basically started off with an idea of what they wanted the finished product to look like, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and then they used Magic mechanics to bring that together. Bottom-up design is where you come up with a set of abilities, essentially, if we're going to talk about Magic. You come up with some rules text that does what you'd like the rules text to do. Now, this is one where the example, I believe, was not from Mark Rosewater, but from another blog that was talking about Mark Rosewater's blog. And they brought up the Wild Mongrel. So Wild Mongrel was a card from Onslaught, I think. And essentially, it was like a 2/2 green creature that got +1/+1 or +2/+2 when you discarded a card. And this is an instance where there was a very obvious set of mechanics that they wanted, because in this block, in Onslaught block, the graveyard mattered. There was a thing called Threshold, which meant you had 7 or more cards in your graveyard, and that gave your certain cards cared if you had Threshold or not. And there were a lot of other interactions with cards in the graveyard. Flashback was a mechanic that let you cast a spell from your graveyard. So having a way to put cards into your graveyard was very important. And so they needed a creature. They wanted something in green to do that, and they used a creature, and the creature got bigger when you threw a card from your hand into the graveyard. But when you look at what the card actually turned out as, it's a Wild Mongrel. That's a dog. Why is this dog getting bigger when you throw a card from your hand into the discard pile? That doesn't match anything. That doesn't make sense from a flavor standpoint. But from a bottom-up design, these were the mechanics we wanted, and then, however we need to get those in the game, that's how we do it. Versus top-down, which is, this is the finished product that I want. What mechanics can I use to build that finished product? So, that's where we're getting into. That's the kind of thing we needed to talk about briefly before the next video, which is the next video. And that is campaign design from a top-down versus bottom-up setting. Now, the easiest top-down, I would say, is easier from a flavor standpoint, because everything is designed around that flavor. And we're not talking Magic anymore, although it applies to Magic. We're talking in general. Bottom up is much harder. If there's a set of mechanics that you want to use, and then you want to somehow take that set of mechanics and put it all together into one cohesive whole, that's more difficult, because those mechanics might not have anything to do with each other. Some of them might seem counter to each other as a possibility, or they might just be so tangential. There's no obvious way to tie them together in a cohesive whole. Whereas if you go the opposite direction, you have the cohesive whole in mind to begin with, and the trouble there is finding the right mechanics to express that. So in dealing with the idea from the last video, Using gold and treasure as experience, we are basically dealing with bottom-up design. We have the mechanic we want, and we somehow need to make the flavor fit that. So that's a very bottom-up thing. We're starting with the mechanic and working our way up towards a cohesive whole, rather than starting with a vision and working our way down. And a lot of what I've been doing over the past forever that I've had this idea in my head, because this isn't recent, I've just been thinking about it more recently. I've had it in the back of my mind for quite some time, is I've been doing a lot of top-down kind of ruminating and philosophizing and thinking about what do I want the finished product to look like. But the fact that I've already got that treasure as experience anchor all the way at the bottom, it makes it a little bit more difficult. And so I've basically started doing a more bottom-up workout on it. I actually have papers here, and there's all these different categories, like little lists I've been writing, and it's a very bottom-up thing, because I've got this bottom-up section and this bottom-up section and this bottom-up section. And I'm trying to, in my mind, invert all of that information and say, okay, what's the vision of what I actually want this product to turn out like? I say product. That's just marketing speak. What is it that I want the final finished thing to look like? And then which of these bottom-up, components are going to fit into that? So I'm trying to force a top-down perspective on a very bottom-up set of components. And it's messing with my brain, but in a good way. I have very specifically not settled on any single detail beyond treasure as experience, and these will be the things that are getting that experience. And other than that, everything else is completely in limbo. And I like having this, I'm about to say literal, but I don't mean literal, this figurative brainstorm. A lot of brainstorming is just, call out any ideas. All ideas are good ideas, throw them down on the board, etc. And that's kind of where I'm sitting. And I'm not letting any, but I don't even like, I don't even like writing down the ideas. The only reason I write them down is to make sure that I don't forget them. But nothing is written down in the sense of concrete, this is what's going to happen. It's all written down as a sense of, who was it? If you watch Friendship is Witchcraft, I think it was Friendship is Witchcraft. No, it wasn't Friendship is Witchcraft. I think it was actually the regular episode of My Little Pony that Friendship is Witchcraft episode came from. In one or the other, Sweetie Belle organizes Rarity's creative room. Kind of, folds up everything, puts it away, and it's all neat and clean. And that's the wrong thing. For the creative purposes, everything needs to be messy and free-flowing, and things need to freely interact with each other in ways that you don't necessarily want. Someone is calling me, so I guess I'm going to have to end this video now. Until next time, bye.